The badge on his chest said, "Captain." But the look in his eyes screamed predator. He didn't just look at her. He looked through her, as if she were a smudge of dirt on his pristine white uniform. "Listen," he scoffed, his voice loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. "I don't know who you slept with to get that ticket, but my cockpit isn't a charity ward. Get your bag, get out of seat 1A, and go back to row 40 where you belong." He thought he was protecting his plane. He thought he was the king of the sky. But Captain Nathaniel Cross had no idea that the woman he'd just humiliated wasn't just a passenger. She wasn't just a woman in a seat. She was Elena Robinson. And 10 minutes ago, she signed the papers that made her his new boss. This is the story of how arrogance crashed and burned before the wheels even left the tarmac. The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 buzzed with a frequency that usually gave Elena Robinson a migraine. But today, the low hum felt like electricity coursing through her own veins. She adjusted the strap of her modest, worn leather tote bag and checked her reflection in the darkened window of the departure gate. She didn't look like a billionaire. She didn't look like the woman who had just acquired a 51% controlling stake in Aerolux International, one of the oldest and most prestigious carriers in the transatlantic corridor. She looked like a tired traveler. She was wearing comfortable black leggings, an oversized beige cashmere sweater that looked older than it was, and running shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, slightly messy bun. This was by design. "Final boarding call for Aerolux Flight 229 to London Heathrow," the gate agent announced, her voice weary. Eleanor clutched her boarding pass. It was stamped clearly. First class, seat 1A. She had insisted on this. The board of directors had wanted to fly her out on a private jet to the London headquarters for the official announcement on Monday. They wanted champagne, press releases, and a red carpet. Elena had refused. "If I'm going to save this airline from bankruptcy," she had told the former CEO, "I need to know how it treats people when the cameras aren't rolling. I need to know why our customer satisfaction scores are in the toilet." She walked toward the priority lane. The carpet was frayed at the edges, the first strike against the maintenance budget. Ahead of her, a tall man in a crisp, navy blue pilot's uniform was cutting through the crowd. He walked with a strut that parted the sea of passengers. He dragged a sleek, rolling flight bag behind him, the gold stripes on his sleeves catching the light. This was Captain Nathaniel Cross. Elena knew his file. He was Aerolux's senior captain, a man with 20 years of flight experience and a personnel file thick with complaints that had been mysteriously swept under the rug. Elena stepped into the priority lane just as Captain Cross swerved to bypass a family struggling with a stroller. He didn't check his speed. His shoulder slammed into Eleanor's, hard enough to knock the boarding pass from her hand and send her tote bag sliding off her shoulder. She stumbled, catching herself on the stanchion rope. "Oh, excuse me," Elena said instinctively, reaching down to grab her pass. Captain Cross didn't stop. He didn't offer a hand. He barely slowed down. He glanced over his shoulder, his blue eyes icy and dismissive. He scanned her face, her hair, and her casual clothes, his lip curling in a micro-expression of disgust. "Watch where you're going," he muttered, the words sharp. "Crew coming through. Move aside." Elena froze. It wasn't just the rudeness, it was the tone. It was the absolute certainty that he was more important than she was. "I am in the line," Elena said, her voice calm but firm. She stood up, brushing lint off her sweater. "You actually walked into me, Captain?" Nathaniel Cross stopped then. He turned fully around, the flight bag coming to a halt. The gate agents paused. The passengers in the economy line quieted down, sensing the friction. "I don't have time for this," Cross said, checking his heavy Breitling watch. "I have 300 souls to transport across the Atlantic. I don't need to be lectured by some—" He trailed off, waving a hand vaguely at her attire. "By someone who is clearly lost. Economy boarding is lane 4, sweetheart. This is for priority." "I know what lane this is," Elena said, holding up her ticket. Cross scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "Right. Upgrade? Points? Or did you just sneak into the line, hoping we wouldn't notice?" He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale coffee. "Do yourself a favor. Step out of the way before I have security escort you for obstructing a flight crew member. That's a federal offense." Elena felt the heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from a simmering, righteous anger. This was the culture of Aerolux? This was the face of her company? "I'm boarding this plane, Captain," Elena said, staring him down, "and I suggest you get to the cockpit and do your pre-flight checks instead of harassing passengers." Cross's jaw tightened. For a second, he looked like he was going to snap, but he noticed a few passengers raising their phones, cameras recording. He knew better than to make a scene on the concourse. "Unbelievable," he spat. "They let anyone in these days." He turned on his heel and stormed down the jet bridge, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like a racial slur, though Elena couldn't be certain. What she was certain of, however, was that Captain Nathaniel Cross had just made the biggest mistake of his career. She picked up her bag. The gate agent, a young man named Greg who looked terrified, scanned her pass. The machine beeped green. "Welcome aboard, Miss." "Robinson?" Greg said, his voice trembling slightly as he glanced toward the jet bridge where the captain had just vanished. "Sorry about him. He's a lot." "It's quite all right, Greg." Elena smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I have a feeling his attitude is about to change." The cabin of the Boeing 777 was cool and smelled of sanitized leather. Elena boarded and turned left into the first-class cabin. It was spacious, with lay-flat pods and massive screens, but the wear and tear was visible here too. Scratches on the console, a stain on the carpet. She found seat 1A. It was the prime spot, directly behind the cockpit, offering the most privacy. She stowed her tote bag in the overhead bin and sat down, pulling a folder of documents out to review. She wanted to read the latest fuel hedging reports before they landed in London. The cabin began to fill up. A businessman in a suit took 1B. An elderly couple took the second row. Elena declined the pre-flight champagne offered by a flight attendant named Sarah. Sarah was sweet, older, with tired eyes that suggested she had been working double shifts. "Just water, please, Sarah," Elena said softly. "Of course, Mum." 10 minutes passed. The boarding was nearly complete. Elena was engrossed in a spreadsheet when the cockpit door opened. Captain Cross emerged. He wasn't wearing his hat now, revealing perfectly coiffed salt and pepper hair. He held a manifest in his hand and was talking loudly to the purser, a stern woman named Linda. "I don't care what the gate says, Linda. The weight distribution is off. We need to check the cargo load again," Cross was saying, his voice booming. He turned, scanning the first-class cabin, likely looking for a friendly face or a high-status frequent flyer he recognized to schmooze with. His eyes landed on seat 1A. He stopped mid-sentence. The blood drained from his face, replaced instantly by a flush of red anger. He marched over to Elena's pod. "You," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Elena didn't look up immediately. She finished highlighting a row on her paper, capped her pen, and then slowly raised her eyes. "Yes, Captain?" "I thought I told you to go to your seat," Cross said. He leaned down, placing a hand on the shell of her seat, effectively boxing her in. I am in my seat, Elena replied, her voice steady. Don't play games with me, Cross hissed. Seat 1A is reserved for full-fare first-class passengers or global elite status members. I know the passenger list. I know who flies my front cabin. I've never seen you before, and judging by the... He flicked his eyes toward her running shoes. Attire, you aren't exactly our target demographic. The businessman in 1B lowered his newspaper. Sarah, the flight attendant, froze in the aisle holding a tray of hot towels. Is there a problem, Captain? Sarah asked tentatively. Yes, Sarah, there is, Cross snapped without looking at her. We have a poacher in first. Probably slipped past Greg at the gate. He turned back to Eleanor. Let me see your boarding pass. Now. I already scanned it at the gate, Eleanor said. I don't need to show it to you. I am the captain of this vessel. Cross raised his voice. The cabin went silent. Under FAA regulations, I have the authority to remove any passenger who disrupts the safety or order of the flight. You are disrupting the order. Now show me the ticket or get off my plane. Elena reached into her pocket. She pulled out the boarding pass. She didn't hand it to him. She held it up. Cross snatched it from her hand. He stared at it. Elena Robinson. 1A, first class. He frowned, looking for a defect. Robinson. Robinson, he muttered. I don't know a Robinson. This must be a system error. Or you used a fake employee pass. He looked at her with renewed suspicion. Are you a dependent? Did some mechanic give you a buddy pass? Because buddy passes don't fly in 1A when I'm the captain. I paid for my ticket, Captain, Elena said coldly. Give it back. I don't believe you, Cross said. The arrogance was suffocating. He couldn't accept that this black woman in a sweatshirt belonged in the most expensive seat on the plane. It broke his worldview. I'm calling the gate. We're going to verify this. He handed the pass to Linda. Get the gate agent down here. Verify payment method. If it's points, if it's an upgrade, if it's a staff pass, I want her moved. I keep seat 1A open for crew rest on long hauls or for VIPs. She is neither. Sir, Linda whispered, looking nervous. The flight is full. There are no other seats in first. If we move her, she has to go to economy. Then send her to economy, Cross shouted. I don't care if she sits in the lavatory. I want this seat clear. I don't like her attitude, and I don't trust her. Elena stood up. She wasn't tall, but she had a presence that suddenly filled the cabin. You don't trust me? Elena asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor. Based on what evidence, Captain Cross? Based on my shoes? Or is it something else? Don't play the race card with me, Cross sneered, pointing a finger in her face. This is about respect. You disrespected me in the terminal, and now you're acting entitled. This is my plane, my rules. You want to fly to London today. You pick up your bag, and you walk back to row 35. Center seat, that's the only spot left, or you get off. Elena looked around. The businessman in 1B was looking down, afraid to intervene. The elderly couple looked horrified, but silent. Sarah was shaking. You are making a mistake, Eleanor said quietly. A very expensive mistake. The only mistake was letting you on board. Cross laughed. He motioned to the door. Move, now, or I call the police and have you dragged off. Elena looked at him for a long, hard moment. She saw the glee in his eyes, the joy of exerting power over someone he deemed lesser. She realized that simply revealing her identity now wouldn't be enough. He would just apologize, grovel, and keep his job. He needed to be exposed. He needed to dig the hole so deep he could never climb out. Fine, Elena said. She grabbed her tote bag. I will move. Cross smirked, crossing his arms over his chest. Smart choice, sweetheart. Enjoy the back of the bus." Elena walked past him. As she passed Linda, she stopped. "Linda, is it?" "Yes, ma'am," Linda said, her face red with embarrassment. "I need the Wi-Fi code," Eleanor said. "I have an urgent email to send before we take off." It's Aerolux Fly," Linda stammered. "Thank you." Eleanor walked down the long aisle, past the lie-flat seats, past premium economy, all the way to the back. The plane was crowded, hot and noisy. She found the empty middle seat in row 35, sandwiched between a crying teenager and a man eating a pungent tuna sandwich. She sat down. She pulled out her phone. She didn't open the in-flight entertainment app. She opened the secure corporate messaging app used by the Aerolux Board of Directors. She began to type. To Board of Directors, HR Legal Team, from E. Robinson, Majority Shareholder. Subject, immediate termination of flight crew, Flight 229. The plane pushed back from the gate. Captain Cross was up front, likely joking with his co-pilot about how he handled the riffraff. He thought the drama was over. But back in row 35, the signal was connecting, and the real turbulence was just about to begin. The seatbelt sign pinged off as the Boeing 447 reached cruising altitude over the Great Lakes, but the tension inside Elena Robinson refused to settle. Row 35, Seat E, the middle seat, was a masterclass in discomfort. To her left, the teenager had finally stopped crying and started listening to heavy metal music, so loud it leaked from his headphones like static hiss. To her right, the man with the tuna sandwich had finished eating, but now he was asleep, his elbow digging sharply into Elena's ribs with every breath he took. She opened her laptop tray. It was broken, tilting precariously to the left. She had to prop it up with her knee to keep her tablet from sliding into her lap. Perfect, Elena thought, her fingers flying across the screen. Broken tray table, seat cushion devoid of padding, air nozzle stuck in the open position. She wasn't just fuming, she was working. She was documenting. Every discomfort she felt was a data point. Captain Cross thought he had punished her by sending her to the back of the bus, but in reality, he had given the new CEO a front-row seat to the airline's failures. If she had stayed in first class, sipping champagne and sleeping on a lay-flat bed, she might never have realized how bad things had truly gotten for the average customer. About 2 hours into the flight, the smell of reheated chicken wafted through the cabin. The service carts began to roll down the aisle. Elena watched the flight attendants. They looked exhausted. Their uniforms were ill-fitting, and their smiles were forced. This was a leadership issue. Unhappy crews made for unhappy passengers, and clearly, working under a tyrant like Captain Cross was draining the morale of the entire team. The cart reached row 35. It was pushed by a young woman named Chloe, whose name tag was slightly crooked. "Chicken or pasta?" Chloe asked mechanically, not making eye contact. "I'll have the pasta, please," Elena said. "We're out of pasta," Chloe sighed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "It's chicken or nothing." "Chicken is fine," Elena said. "And could I have a cup of water?" Chloe handed her a lukewarm tray and a plastic cup that was only half full. "We're running low on water bottles, so sip it slowly," she muttered, before moving to the next row. Elena stared at the tray. The chicken looked rubbery. This was the product Aerolux was charging people $600 for. Suddenly, the PA system crackled to life. It wasn't the soft, professional voice of the flight attendants. It was the booming, arrogant baritone of Captain Nathaniel Cross. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Cross from the flight deck. We've reached our cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. I've found us some smooth air because, well, I know these skies better than anyone. We're making up time despite a delay on the ground caused by... Let's just call it passenger confusion during boarding. Elena stiffened. He was talking about her. He was actually mocking a passenger over the intercom to 300 people. "We run a tight ship up here," Cross continued, his voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "We appreciate you flying Aerolux, where we value class, order, and knowing your place. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride." The man next to Eleanor snorted in his sleep. A few passengers looked around, confused by the captain's weirdly personal tone. Eleanor just closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Keep digging, Nathaniel," she thought. "Keep digging." An hour later, the cabin lights were dimmed. Most passengers were trying to sleep. Elena was reviewing the quarterly financial reports on her tablet, the glow illuminating her focused face. She sensed movement in the aisle. She looked up to see a figure standing there, silhouetted by the dim mood lighting. It was Captain Cross. Pilots often took breaks on long-haul flights, stretching their legs or using the lavatories. But Cross wasn't just stretching. He was patrolling. He walked with his chest puffed out, surveying the sleeping passengers like a warden walking a cell block. He stopped at row 35. He looked down at Eleanor, sandwiched between the sleeping man and the head-banging teenager. A cruel smirk played on his lips. "Comfortable?" he whispered, loud enough for her to hear, but quiet enough not to wake the neighbors. Elena looked up, removing her reading glasses. "I've been better, Captain." "See, this is how the world works," Cross said, leaning one hand on the overhead bin, looming over her. "You respect authority. You get treated well. You act like you own the place when you're a nobody, and you end up in the middle seat." "Is that your philosophy?" Elena asked calmly. "That respect is something you buy." "Respect is something you earn," Cross corrected. "I earned my stripes. I fly a $200 million machine." "You? You look like you barely earned a GED." He chuckled at his own joke. "I checked the manifest again, by the way. No Elena Robinson, listed in the system as a VIP, just a standard economy ticket, which means you lied to my face about paying for first class." "I didn't lie," Elena said. "The system you're looking at, it doesn't show everything. There are clearance levels above yours, Captain." Cross threw his head back and laughed, a silent, mocking shake of his shoulders. "Above mine?" "Sweetheart, at 37,000 feet, nothing is above me except God, and I'm currently sitting in his chair. You're delusional. When we land in London, I'm having the police meet the plane, disrupting a flight crew, lying about a ticket, and theft of services. I'm going to make sure you're banned from flying Aerolux for life." "You really enjoy this, don't you?" Elena asked, studying him like a specimen in a jar. "Bullying people you think can't fight back." "I enjoy order," Cross sneered. He tapped the side of his head. "And I enjoy knowing I was right. Enjoy the chicken." He turned and strutted back toward the front of the plane, disappearing behind the heavy curtain that separated first class, the world of champagne and warm cookies, from the cramped reality of row 35. Elena watched him go. She looked down at her tablet. The Wi-Fi had finally synced her sent folder. The email to the board had been delivered 45 minutes ago. A new notification popped up on her screen. From Jonathan Sterling, Chairman of the Board. Subject: Immediate termination. Message: My God, Elena. We are reading your report. This is unacceptable. We are contacting Heathrow Ground Ops immediately. We will handle this upon arrival. Do not engage further. We are sorry. Elena allowed herself a small, cold smile. She closed the tablet. She didn't need to engage further. The trap was already sprung. In the cockpit, the atmosphere was relaxed. The hum of the avionics cooling fans filled the small space. First Officer Mark Miller was monitoring the fuel flow, while Captain Cross sat in the left seat, feet up on the rudder rest, a violation of protocol, but Cross didn't care, eating a first-class meal on a tray. "Did you see her face?" Cross laughed, wiping sauce from his chin. "Stuck back there with the plebs. God, I love justice." Miller looked uncomfortable. He was 20 years younger than Cross, a sharp pilot who played by the rules. He had seen the interaction at the gate, and it had made his stomach turn. "Captain, are you sure we should have moved her?" Miller asked cautiously. "If she really did pay for that ticket, corporate might get a complaint." "Let them complain." Cross waved a fork dismissively. "I'm the senior captain. I bring in the on-time stats. Corporate eats out of my hand. Besides, she's nobody. Trust me, Mark. In this industry, you have to sniff out the scammers. She was a scammer." Suddenly, the A-Cars printer in the center console whirred to life. It was the text-based communication system used to send messages between the ground and the aircraft. Zzt, zzt. Paper spooled out. "Weather update?" Cross asked lazily. "Or maybe dispatch wants to give me a pat on the back for that shortcut I took over Nova Scotia." Miller tore the slip of paper off. He read it. His eyes went wide. He read it again, his face draining of color. "Captain," Miller said, his voice trembling, "you need to read this." "Read it to me, I'm eating." I think you should read it yourself, sir." Cross sighed, snatched the paper, and held it up to the map light. From HQ London, OPS, Executive Board, to Flight 229. Cockpit, Capt. Cross, F.O. Miller. Priority, critical, confidential. Message upon arrival at LHR, aircraft is to block in at Gate 42. Do not disembark passengers. Airport police and corporate security will meet the aircraft. Station manager and VP of Flight OPS will board immediately. Detain passenger in seat 35E. Repeat, locate passenger Elena Robinson. Ensure she does not leave the aircraft until authorities board. Cross grinned, a wide, predatory smile spreading across his face. He slapped his thigh. "Boom! There it is!" he shouted, shaking the paper at Miller. "What did I tell you? What did I tell you, Mark? Detain passenger in seat 35E. Corporate security is meeting the plane. She must be a criminal. Maybe she's on a watch list. Maybe she used a stolen credit card. I knew it. My gut never lies." Miller looked at the message again. "Sir, it says the VP of Flight Ops is coming, too. That seems excessive for a credit card fraud." "It means she's a big fish, Mark, a con artist." Cross was ecstatic. He felt vindicated. He grabbed the handset to call the purser. "Linda, come to the cockpit." A moment later, Linda entered, looking weary. "Linda," Cross said, handing her the slip. "Look at this. London is waiting for our friend in 35E. When we land, I want you to stand at the cockpit door. No one gets off until the police come on. I want to personally hand her over." Linda read the message. She frowned. "The VP of Flight Ops?" "Sir, Mr. Henderson never comes out for gate meets. He works from the city office." "He's coming to thank me, Linda." Cross smoothed his tie. "He's coming to thank the captain who saved the airline from a security threat. Now go back there and keep an eye on her. Make sure she doesn't try to flush anything down the toilet." Linda nodded slowly, a bad feeling settling in her gut, and left the cockpit. Back in row 35, Elena was asleep. She had learned to sleep anywhere, a skill picked up during her years building her first logistics company from the ground up. She woke up as the plane began its initial descent into London. The cabin lights came up. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cross's voice came over the PA, sounding almost giddy. "We are beginning our descent into London Heathrow. We're expecting a timely arrival. I'd like to ask all passengers to remain seated even after the aircraft comes to a complete stop at the gate. We have a minor security formality to address before we can let you off." "Thank you for your patience," the passengers murmured. A security formality? People looked nervous. The plane banked through the grey English clouds. Down below, the sprawling complex of Heathrow Airport came into view. The landing was rough. Cross slammed the gear onto the runway harder than necessary, a sign of his adrenaline and distraction. He braked aggressively, turning off the runway and taxiing toward the terminal. "Welcome to London," Miller whispered. As they taxied, Elena looked out the window. She saw the gate approaching. Usually there were just a few ground crew members in neon vests. Today, there was a reception committee. She saw 3 black SUVs parked on the tarmac near the jet bridge stairs. She saw 2 police cars with blue lights flashing silently. She saw a group of men in expensive suits standing next to the ground power unit, holding against the wind. The man in 35F woke up. "Whoa," he said, looking out the window. "Look at the cops. Someone's in trouble." "Yes," Elena said softly, smoothing her sweater. "Someone is." The plane chocked in at the gate. The engines whined down. The seatbelt sign turned off, but then Cross's voice boomed again. "Remain seated. Everyone down. Crew, disarm doors and stand by." The front door of the aircraft, L1, opened. From her seat in the back, Elena couldn't see the door, but she could hear the commotion. Captain Cross burst out of the cockpit. He stood at the front of the first-class cabin, his cap tucked under his arm, his chest puffed out. He waited for the police to enter so he could point them toward row 35. 2 officers in bright yellow visibility jackets boarded first. Behind them came a tall, grey-haired man in a dark suit, Arthur Henderson, the VP of Flight Operations for Aerolux. Behind him was a woman with a tablet, the London station manager. Cross stepped forward, extending a hand to Henderson. "Arthur, good to see you," Cross beamed. "I'm glad you came personally. The situation was tricky, but I handled it. The suspect is in the rear, row 35. I can have my crew bring her forward," or Henderson didn't shake Cross's hand. He didn't even look at it. He looked past Cross, his eyes scanning the cabin with intense urgency. "Where is she?" Henderson asked, his voice tight. "She's in the back, like I said," Cross chuckled. "Row 35, I made sure she stayed put." Henderson turned to the police officers. "Officers, please clear the aisle." "Right," Cross said. "Go get her, boys." But the officers didn't move toward the back to make an arrest. They simply stood aside to create a corridor. Henderson looked at the purser, Linda. "Linda, please escort Ms. Robinson to the front immediately. And apologize for the delay." Cross froze. The smile wavered. "Ms. Robinson? You mean the stowaway?" "Stowaway." Henderson turned his cold gaze onto Cross. "Nathaniel, do you have any idea who is on your aircraft?" "A woman with a fake ticket," Cross stammered. "A troublemaker." Linda was already running down the aisle. She reached row 35, breathless. "Mom," Linda said, looking at Eleanor. They are waiting for you." Eleanor unbuckled her belt. She grabbed her tote bag. She stood up, her legs stiff from 7 hours in the middle seat. The passengers around her stared. Was she being arrested? Eleanor walked up the aisle. It was a long walk. Every row she passed, heads turned. She walked through economy, through premium economy. She reached the curtain to first class. She pulled it aside. She stepped into the first-class galley. Captain Cross was standing there, looking confused, his hand still half extended toward Henderson. When Eleanor appeared, Henderson, the vice president of the airline, the man Cross feared and respected, stepped forward and bowed his head slightly. "Ms. Robinson," Henderson said, his voice full of genuine deference and horror. "On behalf of the entire executive team, I am so sorry. Welcome to London." Cross looked from Henderson to Elena. His brain couldn't process the image. The VP was bowing to the woman in the running shoes? "Arthur?" Cross asked, his voice high and thready. "What is going on? Why are you apologizing to her?" Elena stopped. She stood right in front of Cross. She was shorter than him, but in that moment she seemed 10 feet tall. "Hello, Captain," Elena said. "I believe you have my seat." "Your seat?" Cross blinked. "Seat 1A, Elena said. "The one I paid for, the one you threw me out of." Henderson turned to Cross, his face turning purple with rage. "Captain Cross, are you telling me you denied first-class seating to the owner of this airline?" The silence that followed was louder than a jet engine. "Owner," Cross whispered. The word fell out of his mouth like a stone. "Captain Cross," Henderson said, his voice ice-cold. "Meet Elena Robinson. As of this morning, she is the majority shareholder and the new CEO of Aerolux International. She is your boss." Cross's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the bulkhead for support. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. He looked at Elena, his eyes wide with terror. The flashbacks hit him all at once. The insult at the gate, the poacher comment, the back of the bus remark, the mocking PA announcement. He had spent 7 hours bullying the woman who held his career in the palm of her hand. Elena didn't yell. She didn't scream. She simply adjusted her tote bag and looked him dead in the eye. "We have a meeting in the boardroom in 1 hour, Captain," Elena said calmly. "I suggest you be there, and bring your flight log." She turned to the police. "Officers, thank you for the escort. I have a company to fix." She walked off the plane, leaving Captain Nathaniel Cross standing in the wreckage of his own arrogance, while the entire first-class cabin watched in stunned silence. The drive from Heathrow Terminal 3 to the Aerolux corporate headquarters was short, but for Captain Nathaniel Cross, it felt like a funeral procession. He sat in the back of a company car, not the luxury sedan he usually requested, but a standard fleet vehicle driven by a silent security officer. His hands, usually so steady on the yoke of a 777 during a crosswind landing, were trembling in his lap. He checked his phone. No messages from his friends. No support from the pilots' union yet. The news had traveled faster than the aircraft. The jungle drums of the airline industry were beating, and the rhythm was ominous. The headquarters was a gleaming building of steel and glass, designed to look like an airfoil. Cross walked through the lobby. Usually the receptionists would wave, and junior pilots would nod with respect. Today the lobby was deadly silent, eyes averted. Whispers ceased the moment he passed. He was a ghost walking among the living. He was directed to the executive boardroom on the top floor. Cross adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and pushed open the heavy oak doors. The room was freezing. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt designed to preserve bodies. At the head of the long, polished mahogany table sat Elena Robinson. She hadn't changed. She was still wearing the beige sweater, the leggings, and the running shoes. But in this environment, surrounded by men in three-piece suits, she didn't look underdressed. She looked like she owned the building, because she did. To her right sat Arthur Henderson, the VP of Flight Ops. To her left was Julia Mason, the Director of Human Resources, a woman known for her icy demeanor and ironclad legal knowledge. In the corner sat Gavin Reed. The union representative Cross had frantically texted. Reed looked pale and refused to meet Cross's eyes. "Sit down, Captain," Elena said. She didn't look up from a file she was reading. Cross pulled out the leather chair at the opposite end of the table. The distance between them felt like miles. "Ms. Robinson?" Cross began, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat, trying to summon the bravado that had served him for 20 years. I want to start by saying, clearly, emotions were high today. The aviation environment is stressful. We are trained to make split-second decisions to protect the aircraft. If my assessment of your presence was incorrect, I apologize for the inconvenience. It was a non-apology, a sorry you felt that way speech. Elena finally looked up. Her eyes were dark and unreadable. She closed the file, his personnel file, with a soft thud. Inconvenience, Elena repeated. Is that what you call it when you humiliate a paying customer? When you profile a black woman as a fraud because she doesn't fit your narrow world view of what success looks like? When you purposefully seat the owner of the company in a broken seat next to a lavatory to teach her a lesson? I didn't know who you were, Cross blurted out. If I had known. That, Elena cut him off, her voice sharp as a whip, is exactly the problem, Nathaniel. You treat people with respect only if you think they have power. You treat people well only if you think they can hurt you. That isn't professionalism. That is cowardice. I am the senior captain of this fleet. Cross slammed his hand on the table, his temper flaring again. He couldn't help it. His ego was too fragile. I have 20,000 flight hours. I have a spotless safety record. You can't just come in here, fresh off a buyout, and lecture me on how to run my plane. I am the authority in the sky. You are a liability, Julia Mason, the HR director, spoke up. Her voice was calm and terrifying. Captain Cross, we aren't just here to discuss today's incident. Ms. Robinson's experience prompted us to open the Resolved archive. The complaints regarding your conduct over the last 5 years. Cross froze. Those were handled. They were baseless. Were they? Elena opened the file again. May 2021. You grounded a flight for 2 hours because a junior flight attendant didn't iron your shirt correctly. You made her cry in the galley in front of passengers. She was incompetent, Cross argued. August 2023, Elena continued. A complaint from a family traveling with an autistic child. You threatened to kick them off because the child was making noises that disturbed your focus during boarding. The door was open. The engines were off. You just didn't like the noise. It's a safety issue. October 2024, Elena read the last one. First Officer David Chen requested a transfer from your rotation. In his exit interview, he cited hostile work environment and constant racial microaggressions. The previous management buried it. I dug it up. Eleanor slid a photo across the long table. It spun and stopped right in front of Cross. It was a still image taken from a passenger's video earlier that day at O'Hare. It showed Cross leaning into Eleanor's face, his finger pointed, his face twisted in a snarl. This video, Elena said, was uploaded to TikTok 3 hours ago by a teenager in the waiting area. It has 4 million views. The hashtag #AutoAerolux is currently trending #1 globally. Cross stared at the photo. The blood roared in his ears. You are destroying the brand I just bought, Elena said softly. You are the rot in the foundation. You can't fire me, Cross hissed, looking at Gavin Reed. Gavin, tell them. The union contract. Clause 14(2). I have tenure. I have rights to a tribunal. You can't just fire a senior captain based on a viral video and a bad attitude. Gavin Reed, the union rep, finally spoke. He adjusted his glasses and looked at his shoes. Nathaniel, the union protects pilots against unfair dismissal and operational errors. We don't protect against gross misconduct and public reputational damage that threatens the solvency of the airline. If the advertisers pull out because of you, we all lose our jobs. Reed looked up, his eyes sad. We aren't contesting this, Nate. You're on your own. Cross felt the walls closing in. He stood up. Fine. You want to play it this way? I'll sue. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them the new woke CEO is purging the old guard. I'll tell them you compromised safety by distracting the crew. I will burn this place to the ground before I let you take my wings. Elena stood up too. She didn't shout. She didn't look afraid. She looked at him with pity. Hand over your badge, Nathaniel, she said. Make me, he sneered. Elena looked at Arthur Henderson. Captain Cross, Henderson said formally. You are hereby suspended without pay, pending the conclusion of a formal inquiry. You are stripped of your command authority, effective immediately. Please place your ID and your KCM access card on the table. Security will escort you out. Cross looked around the room. He saw no allies, only the cold, hard face of consequences. He ripped the ID badge off his shirt, tearing the fabric. He threw it on the table. It slid across the mahogany and hit Elena's hand. This isn't over, Cross whispered. You don't know who you're messing with. I think I do, Elena replied. Goodbye, Mr. Cross. He stormed out. The heavy doors slammed behind him. The room was silent. He's going to cause trouble, Julia Mason said, tapping her pen. He's a narcissist. He won't go quietly. I know, Elena said, sitting back down and rubbing her temples. That's why we need to be ready. Get the PR team in here and find me Sarah, the flight attendant from Flight 229. I need a witness who was on the inside. Nathaniel Cross didn't go home. He went to a bar in the terminal of a rival airline, ordered a double whiskey, and made a phone call. He called Marcus Thorne, a sensationalist journalist for the Daily Echo, a tabloid known for stirring up controversy and attacking corporate elites. Cross had met Thorne years ago at a charity gala. They shared a similar disdain for authority. Marcus! Cross shouted over the noise of the bar. It's Nate Cross. I have a story, a big one. The new owner of Aerolux. She's out of control. She just fired the most senior captain in the fleet because I wouldn't upgrade her for free. She endangered a flight. I want to go on the record. The next morning, the headline screamed from the newsstands and splashed across Twitter. Hero pilot, fired by billionaire tyrant. Captain Nathaniel Cross claims he was terminated for refusing to break safety protocols for new CEO Elena Robinson. The article was a masterpiece of spin. Cross painted himself as the guardian of the skies, a working-class hero who stood up to an entitled billionaire who demanded special treatment. He claimed Elena was belligerent and intoxicated, a complete lie, and that he moved her to the back for the safety of the flight. For about 6 hours, public opinion wavered. The internet loves to hate billionaires. Comments started to flood Aerolux's social media pages. Boycott Aerolux. Justice for Captain Cross. In the CEO's office, the PR team was in a panic. We need to issue a statement, the PR director urged. He's winning the narrative. People believe him because he's a pilot. They trust the uniform. Elena stood by the window, looking out at the rainy London skyline. She was holding a cup of tea, her expression calm amidst the chaos. We don't need a statement, Elena said. We need the truth. Statements are corporate. The truth is human. She turned to Julia Mason. Did you speak to Sarah? Yes, Julia nodded. Sarah, Linda, and First Officer Miller. They are all terrified of Cross, even now. But they are willing to speak if we protect them. Good, Elena said. And what about the airport footage? The CCTV from the gate? We have it, Arthur Henderson said. It has no audio, but the body language is aggressive. However, we have something better. Henderson plugged a USB drive into the large screen on the wall. A passenger in the first-class cabin, Mr. Sterling, no relation to the board member, was recording a vlog about his flight. He didn't post it because he didn't want to get involved, but he sent it to us this morning when he saw the headlines. Elena watched the screen. The video showed the interior of the cabin clearly. It showed Elena sitting quietly in 1A. It showed Cross looming over her, shouting. The audio was crystal clear. "I don't know who you slept with to get that ticket. Get your bag, get out of seat 1A, and go back to row 40 where you belong. Don't play the race card with me." The video continued. It showed Cross strutting away, laughing with the purser. It showed Eleanor quietly gathering her things, dignity intact, and walking to the back. "He lied about everything," Julia Mason whispered. "He said you were belligerent. You barely raised your voice." "Release it," Eleanor said. "With a press release?" "No," Eleanor said. "Just the video. Caption it. The truth at 30,000 feet. Let the world decide who the tyrant is." At 2:01 p.m., Aerolux posted the unedited video to their official channels. The reaction was instantaneous. The internet is a volatile beast, but it has a nose for hypocrisy. The video went viral within minutes. The same people who had been defending Cross suddenly saw the reality. A bullying, misogynistic, racist man abusing his power against a quiet, composed woman. The comments flipped. "OMG, look at how he talks to her. He asked who she slept with? That's sexual harassment. She owns the airline and she still moved. That's class. He's trash." But the real blow, the hard karma, was yet to land. While the internet was dissecting the video, Elena's legal team was busy. They weren't just looking at the airline. They were looking at Cross's finances. During the discovery phase for the potential lawsuit Cross threatened, the Aerolux forensic accountants found something interesting in the pilot's payroll and expense logs. That evening, Elena called a press conference. She didn't stand behind a podium. She sat in a chair, flanked by Sarah, the flight attendant, and First Officer Mark Miller. "We aren't here to attack Mr. Cross," Elena told the assembled reporters, cameras flashing blindingly. "We are here to apologize to the passengers and staff he hurt over the years, but we also have a duty to the law." She motioned to the screen. "Our internal investigation has revealed that Captain Cross has been running a pay-for-seat scheme for the past 5 years. He has been selling upgrades to first class for cash that goes into his pocket, not the airlines, and bumping legitimate passengers to economy to make room for his friends or paying customers. The woman he bumped me for? She wasn't a security risk. She was simply in a seat he wanted to sell to someone else." The room gasped. This wasn't just being rude. This was fraud. This was a federal crime. "We have turned over all evidence to the Federal Aviation Administration and the FBI," Elena said. "Aerolux is pressing charges for embezzlement and fraud." At that very moment, across town in his luxury apartment, Nathaniel Cross was watching the TV. The whiskey glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. His phone rang. It wasn't the journalist. It wasn't the union. It was the police. "Mr. Nathaniel Cross, this is Detective Miller from the Economic Crimes Unit. We have a warrant for your arrest. Please come to the front door with your hands empty." Cross ran to the window. Down below, the blue lights were flashing. Not the airport police this time. The real police. He had started the day thinking he was the king of the sky. He was ending it as a common criminal, exposed by the very woman he thought was beneath him. The karma had arrived, and it had arrived with handcuffs. The fall of Captain Nathaniel Cross was absolute. 6 months after his arrest, he stood in a federal courtroom in London, stripped of his uniform, his pension, and his arrogance. The forensic investigation had uncovered not just the discrimination against Elena, but a 5-year history of pay-for-seat fraud, where Cross had pocketed cash for unauthorized upgrades. The judge was merciless. Mr. Cross, you treated the sky as your personal kingdom and passengers as your subjects, he declared, the gavel banging down like a gunshot. You are sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, and your pilot's license is permanently revoked. As Cross was led away in handcuffs, he scanned the gallery for a friendly face. But there were none. His union reps, his drinking buddies, and his lawyers had all abandoned him. He walked through the side door alone, leaving the aviation world forever. Meanwhile, Elena Robinson was busy rebuilding Aerolux from the ashes. She knew that firing the bad apples wasn't enough. She had to fertilize the soil for the good ones to grow. A few weeks after the trial, she gathered the entire London staff in the main maintenance hangar. Standing before a massive turbine engine, she called 2 people to the stage. Sarah, the flight attendant who had served her water with shaking hands, and First Officer Mark Miller. "Sarah," Elena announced, her voice echoing through the silent hangar, "you maintained your dignity in the face of abuse. That is leadership. You are now the head of in-flight services." Sarah wept openly as the crowd cheered. Elena then turned to Mark. "And you, Mark, risked your career to tell the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. That is what a captain does." Elena handed him a box. Inside were 4 gold stripes. "We are waiving the seniority requirement. You are now the youngest captain in our fleet." A year later, Elena found herself back at O'Hare Airport. She was flying back to London for the annual shareholder meeting. She wore a simple blazer and her favorite comfortable running shoes. She approached the gate, where a new agent smiled warmly. "Boarding pass, please," the agent said. The machine beeped green for seat 1A. "You're all set, Ms. Robinson. Have a wonderful flight." There were no insults, no sneers, and no drama. Elena walked down the jet bridge, the memory of that terrible day finally fading. Standing at the aircraft door was Captain Mark Miller. He saw her coming, stepped aside, and offered a sharp, respectful salute. "Welcome aboard, boss," Mark smiled, his eyes bright with genuine respect. "Hello, Captain," Elena replied, stepping into the cabin that was no longer a place of fear, but a place of welcome. "Let's go fly." And that is the story of how one arrogant captain learned the hardest lesson of his life. Never judge a book by its cover. Nathaniel Cross thought his uniform and his title made him a king, but he forgot that true power isn't about looking down on people. It's about lifting them up. Elena Robinson proved that you don't need to shout to be heard, and you don't need a badge to be a leader. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the cards. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that arrogance always comes before a fall. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind because you never know who you're talking to. See you in the next video.